All right, guys. Hello, good afternoon, and good evening. I don't get to say that often because it's usually good morning, good afternoon. But hey, guys, it's Jason Flame from the Master Motivation Podcast. I am excited to be here once again this week, and we have another great guest. And let me introduce him right away. This is Mr. Brian Doucette. He's a seasoned broadcaster and lifelong martial artist who brings over 30 years of radio and professional voiceover experience to the mic. A black belt whose martial arts journey began in 1984 after being inspired by the Karate Kid. Brian has trained for more than 35 years while also building a career behind the scenes and on air in radio since the age of 15. His vision for martial arts radio show dates back to the late 90s, but it wasn't until recently that the timing and format aligned. After years of persistence and passion, Brian finally launched the martial arts podcast he always envisioned, bringing stories, insights, and voices from the martial arts world to life. Hey, Brian, thanks for being on the show today.
Hey, no problem, Jason. I know we've been talking about it for probably a couple of years, ever since you were on my show, so glad we're finally able to make it happen.
Yes, sir. We had a great conversation when I had the opportunity to be on the Everyday Martial Artist podcast, which, guys, by the way, go check it out. He's had some amazing guests. I mean, if you go back, there's a library of amazing martial artists there. So you want to check that out, and we'll talk more about it. But yeah, we've been putting this off for about a year or so, and here we are. I'm back on it, and again, excited to have you. So catch me up. What's been going on since we last talked on your podcast?
Just a lot more episodes. I mean, it's just over 4 years and I've never missed a Thursday. Every single Thursday, a new episode. I've come close a few times. There's a couple times where I was still editing a podcast at like 1 a.m. to release it the next morning. It's only happened a couple times, but right now I think I'm about 6 weeks ahead with interviews, and people just keep saying yes. I've had some really, probably the biggest name since you went on is probably Mark Dacascos. That's one I've been trying to get since day one, and finally got to chat with Mark for my 200th episode. That was a dream come true. But honestly, some of my most popular ones have been the unknowns, the people that no one's ever heard of, the instructors down the road. And I mean, I went back and interviewed my original instructors from 40 years ago and 30 years ago and stuff like that. So it's keeping me busy. I mean, between this, like you mentioned, I also do voiceover work. I do the podcast. I have a full-time job in IT. That's not really my passion, but I do. Plus, I also do sports PA announcing. So I like to stay. Yeah, I like to stay busy. I'm a local PA announcer for some local college sports and some high school sports, and I've done MMA announcing, and I've done you name it, from basketball to volleyball to soccer, baseball, softball, and a bunch of other ones in between. So I like to stay busy.
Yeah, man, that sounds awesome. Those are all things that I think we have a lot of crossover, a lot of things in common there. Regarding the sports and the announcing and the you probably saw in the opening video. I did some professional wrestling for a little while. So yeah, it's all fun. Gosh, Mark Dacascos, that is definitely a dream list for me as well. So I'm gonna have to use our connection there to see if we can get him on the show, because I remember growing up watching Only the Strong, one of my favorite movies back in the day. I didn't know what capoeira was, and now there's that movie. So pretty awesome.
I had seen it once before, from the 80s movie Rooftops with Jason Gedrick from Iron Eagle. They had, I don't think they actually, if I remember, I don't think they called it capoeira. They called it combat dancing, but it was capoeira. And that was the first time I'd seen it, and no clue. So when I saw Only the Strong, I'm like, oh, this is so much cooler than that other movie. So
it was so great. And you bring up Jason Gedrick from Iron Eagle, another great 80s. I mean, we're 80s kids, so we like all those 80s movies. But another one he was in was The Last Dawn. I'm a huge Mafia fan, love watching that. So he was great in that. But hey, we could talk about movies, and we can talk about all this stuff, or we could talk about you. And so I think that the listeners, I know your mom's listening. Hi, Mom. She's out there. And so, let's tell them a little bit more about you. And guys, as you're watching through this live stream today, or if you're watching this on the playback sometime down the line, and you have questions or comments, thoughts, please post them in the comments and share this video. But let's talk about, you had the idea for a radio show, a martial arts radio show, as far back as 97. What kept you coming back to this idea all those years?
Well, and the thing, 97, what happened there, I was working at a small radio station in West Fargo, North Dakota. It was an oldies music station, so it was 50s, 60s, 70s rock and roll and stuff like that. And when you work in radio, you always get pitched other shows, like syndicated shows. And I'm the one who got the mail. I was like assistant program director. So and I actually got pitched a weekly martial arts talk show. I wish I could remember. I want to say it was called like Warrior Talk or something like that. I could be wrong. I don't know. It came on a cassette tape, and I listened to it.
Cassette tape.
I know. But my boss was like, no, it won't work on a music station. But I'm like, that's a cool idea. Maybe it's something I could do. So literally, as every station I worked at from that station got sold and turned into a talk station. So of course I pitched it to them, and they're like, well, could you fill daily? I'm like, no, I don't think I could do a daily martial arts. That would be a lot to do. It's like, no, then we can't do it because we want daily shows. We want shows that are Monday through Friday. So I couldn't do that. 3 years later, started another radio station, pitched it to them. No, basically every station I worked at up until 2011, I pitched it to every station. 2011, I thought I was going to actually get it done. I was an AM talk station I was on, and I went out before I even pitched it. I went out and I lined up 20 guests and 5 sponsors, and the station manager still said no.
Oh, wow.
I have money, people willing to pay me to do this show. Right. And I had local guests, and I even had one of the guests that I finally got a big name on my current podcast that I had about a year, New York Times best-selling author named Barry Eisler. He's got a series of books called the John Rain series, and it's about this assassin who's a judo black belt, and he himself is a judo black belt. So I reached out to him through his publisher and had it set up, and then of course the show never happened. And luckily I was able to get a hold of him, 10 years later, right, and get him on my show, which was kind of cool. But it's just, and back then I thought about the podcast thing, but at the time I was just so busy. I was just launching my voiceover thing, really pushing that and stuff, and wasn't sure how I wanted to take that much time. I had 3 at the time, 2011. All my kids were under the age of 12. 3 kids. I just didn't think I had the time. Right. So I always kept it in the back, someday I'll do it as a podcast, because by then I had kind of quit radio because there was no money in radio. I did radio off and on for 20-25 years, and I think the most I made was $11 an hour. So wasn't really a great career. Right. So I just thought this podcast thing is fun. And I kept thinking, and I actually launched a few other podcasts before that, and 2 of them are still going. 2 of my podcasts out of the 3 I've done are still going. The other one got to like 55 episodes in that. And finally, when COVID hit, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do this. I have more free time. Yeah. Of course, on a side note, I didn't think about once that was done, all my other stuff I was doing would come back, and then I'd really have no free time. So that kind of hit me like that. But so basically what I did when I launched it, I reached out to as many people as I could, people I'd met, people I didn't know. I wanted to have a mixture of big names, local people. And I actually, before I launched the show, I had 26 episodes fully recorded and produced. Wow. Before I launched the show. So I was, I'm like, even if it fails, I'm going to get like 6 months out of it.
Well, and people don't understand, right? Like, the podcast thing, right? I think it's really more or less a passion project for most of us, yes, right? That do a podcast, unless you're Joe Rogan or, Jocko, right? Which you never know, could happen, right? Yeah. By the way, anybody watching, listening, get Jocko or Joe Rogan on either of our shows, and we'll be super happy. But I do it live, right? You asked me a bunch of times. I do it live. I do it raw. I post it. I leave it. It's there. It's done. You take it and edit it and have to work with it. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of work. And I'll be honest. I just in my life don't have the time to do that with my martial arts school, my family, Chamber of Commerce obligations, city things. It's like, but people don't really understand. They're like, oh, you just have that podcast on, an hour a week. Well, man, I post every day about it. You're constantly searching for guests. You're chasing after guests for bios and pictures and this and that. And it's like, it's a lot of work, but we love it, right? I mean, we love it. So we keep doing it. We keep coming back. I mean, you're how many episodes now? 200?
223 was the one that came out today.
Awesome.
And that's actually funny. There's 2 podcasts that came out today, both interviewing someone named Brian Doucette. So, and
it's funny. I saw that name too somewhere. I'm like, wait, that's who I'm interviewing.
Yeah, I actually found a Canadian musician named Brian Doucette, who's also a martial artist, and I reached out to him like, this is going to be fun. Let's do it. He's like, sure, that'd be cool. So yeah, that episode came out today. So I got to interview someone named Brian. And a lot of people like, is this a joke? I'm like, no. But yeah, the editing is. I spend about, on average, depending on the episode, my average interviews are about an hour. And with that, it's about 5 hours I spend editing. Because and I do it different than like, I've been editing audio even since before I started in radio. I started dabbling in audio on my Commodore 64 back in the 86, 87, messing with stuff with that. And so I'm very picky, and I've had a lot of my guests tell me it's the best sounding podcast they've ever been on. I take pride in that. And some big names have told me that. So, I mean, what I do is I record, like as me and you were talking, I record each voice in a separate channel. So I'll first go through my guest voice, and I'll go through and any background stuff I can like mute out and quiet out. Then that'll take, about an hour and a half. Then I'll do the same to my voice. That's a little quicker because I know what I'm doing a little more on that one. Then I'll mix them together. Then I'll do the overall edit where I listen to the whole thing, and I'll, take out too many ums, or I'll shorten. Sometimes when you're doing this, there's latency with the internet, and there's pauses that you didn't hear when you were talking, where they'll just suddenly it's 3 seconds longer than you thought the pause was. So I'll shorten those up and make them sound more natural and stuff. And all said and done, a good 4 to 5 hours. And, my longest episode broke 2 hours, and that was over 10 hours of editing. That was brutal, and I never want to do that again.
Wow. Yeah. That's a long time.
He liked to talk.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think after we were done editing, it was about an hour 43.
Well, it's funny, I think as martial artists, and not all of the guests on my show are martial artists, but it seems like, the martial artists, they love their stories. They love to talk. And I mean, it's kind of natural because we're on the mat all day long teaching, telling stories. And it's like, our students eat it up. And, but it's sometimes, even my son has to remind me, Dad, we heard that story yesterday. And I said, okay, fair enough. So tell me, what was your first experience behind the mic? 15 years old. How did that shape your approach to broadcasting today?
It was kind of funny. So, at the time I was, I was working for a newspaper place unloading trucks, and I wanted something, first of all, that paid better. I think back then I was making minimum wage $3.35 an hour. And some kids in my school were like, hey, this radio station's hiring people for $4 an hour. I'm like, $4 an hour. Oh my God. That's huge money in 1989, so I went and applied, and they hired me. We weren't called DJs. We were called board ops. They jokingly called us babysitters. We weren't supposed to actually talk on the mic. But we got to the point where we knew, like, when the manager of the owner wasn't in town, if he's leaving for the weekend or something like that. He's a big Chicago Bulls fan, so he'd travel to Chicago and go to Bulls games. And so the guys on the other station, we were in AM and FM. I work on the FM. The guys in the AM would be like, if you want to record the weather, I'll teach you how. So it was like, the first time recording was when we weren't supposed to be doing it. We turned on the mic and recorded the weather and stuff. Or he's like, just intro that song. No one will ever know. It's like, now here's the Beach Boys. So my first, roughly year of that was me doing it when I wasn't supposed to be. But I loved doing it. I mean, but even before that, I mean, me and my best friend growing up, Aaron, lived across the street from me. We'd do fake radio stations. We'd get my dad's cassette recorder and do KIDS radio, and we'd be sitting next to the record player and introducing music and stuff, and we thought we were the coolest kids in the world. So it was kind of a natural thing to do it in radio, and worked there all through high school until I left for college, and then did college in radio. But the high school thing was fun. I mean, there I had there was a playlist. I rarely got to pick what I got to do. Whereas in college, it's like, you can play whatever you want, so right. Like I grew up listening to 50s, 60s, 70s, but I also love the 80s and stuff like so. In my college show, I'd go from the Beatles to Run DMC to Def Leppard to Elvis, all in the same show. So that was a lot more fun. And, and then just each station I got to, I got more responsibility. I was a sports director at a station and stuff. And then, of course, at the station in 97, I started my first own weekly radio show. That was a music-based show. And it just is something I just love doing. And that, kind of led to voiceover, because the one radio station I was working at, they ended up canceling my weekly show, but a station in my hometown contacted me like, we want to do your show. I'm like, well, I can't drive down there once a week to do it. So I set up a small studio in basement and started, basically doing radio production in my studio, and had a syndicated radio show, back in like 1998, that's, been going for a while. And what happened was, a friend of mine came over. He's like, you have a studio? I'm like, yeah. He goes, so you could record a commercial for my business? I'm like, yeah, I suppose I could. And that's kind of how voiceover started in like 99, is just randomly doing a commercial for a friend, and started digging more into that and looking into it. And now I've been heard on Spotify and Fox Sports 1 and things like that, and done stuff for like Toyota and Choice Hotels. And so, yeah, it's kind of, I'll just keep going and follow the dream.
And you never know what opportunity comes from each one of those experiences, which is
Exactly.
really unique. So I got to ask, are you a pro wrestling fan at all? Did you ever watch pro wrestling growing up?
I mean, I probably watched it, but definitely not a fan. No.
The reason I ask is because, one of my favorite parts about professional wrestling is listening to the commentators, because the
Yeah.
commentators are the ones that basically tell the story to the audience that doesn't really understand what's going on in the match, and helping
Yeah.
carry people through that storyline. And so, I always think, people that know their craft, whether it's martial arts or
Hmm.
professional wrestling, or radio, so you could get on there and you got your talking points, and you can kind of feed off of the different lines or different people that you're talking to, which I'm sure really helps with the podcasting as well.
Yeah, but like what you're talking about, like I would never do the play-by-play stuff. I've never had an interest. I mean, I do the stadium announcing. That's a lot
Uh-huh.
different. I
Yes.
got a lot of friends who do play-by-play, and they're amazing.
Yeah.
Maybe I could do color commentary, but the play-by-play actually scares me. I don't think I could do that.
Yeah. 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 Hey, we got a viewer. Is this a friend here? This is Aaron.
That's the best friend that I did the KIDS radio with when we were like 9 years old.
There you go. Cool.
That's
Aaron,
awesome.
thank you for watching, Aaron. Tell us any, if you have any good stories about Brian that he doesn't want us to know, pop that in the comments. After,
Just make sure the statute of limitations is up before she tells those stories.
after 35 plus years in the martial arts, how do you think the martial arts community has changed since you first started?
Well, it's definitely gotten bigger, I think. And sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. I mean, when I first got into it at the age of 10, I mean, I didn't know there was different styles of martial arts. I mean, my first style, I went to the Karate Kid. My first style was Tong Sudo,
Mm-hmm.
and and I did.
I know that style.
Yeah, that was my first style when I was 10, and went from that to Shotokan to Aikido and Taekwondo and American Kempo and a bunch of other stuff in between. And it's I've seen the good and the bad on both sides of it. I the first Taekwondo school, I've told the story on my podcast many times, that the first Taekwondo instructor I was with, I call him my John Kreese. He literally drove me to the point where I hated martial arts and was going to give it up completely. And luckily found the instructor I'm still with to this day, that I've been with since March of '94. So I've seen just the politics of martial arts and how badly and I think that's gotten worse, unfortunately. Like my first 6-7 years in the martial arts, I never saw that. I mean, I was also 10, 11, 12, 15, 16 years old. So that's probably why I never saw that.
Right.
But that's to me, that's one of the biggest changes. And also it's just the other changes. I think another big one that most people would agree with is the social media aspect and the videos. Because, 10 years, 1984, I mean, if I wanted to find out how to do something, I had to ask my instructor. I couldn't go into YouTube and type it in and say, how do you do this technique? Or how do you do this form?
Right.
Or even just people who train now by video and virtual training and stuff. And it was kind of funny before COVID. So many people were against, you can't train by video. You can't. And suddenly COVID hit and everyone's like, we got to train by video. It's the same exact people. So,
Right.
There's very few that were doing. I mean, there were some, and some were doing it very well, that were doing video training before that. But I think that's a big part of it now. There's people becoming, legit martial artists, mostly learning through video. And it's not possible with every style. Obviously, obviously like jiu-jitsu, you could never do that. You kind of need that partner and stuff, but
Right.
there is some stuff you can learn virtually and learn it very well.
And I think there's a very big difference when you're talking about martial arts in general,
Mhm.
the martial arts, and then martial arts business, right?
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
they have both evolved greatly, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in martial arts, the physical, mental, spiritual aspect, I think has only gotten better. I mean, and not that UFC is the end all of martial arts, but you see how evolved that's become. That started very different than how the
Yeah.
athletes are today. I think that's what we see in martial arts now, is that there are more developed athletes intentionally, instead of either by accident or by weeding out the people that were weak. And also the mental aspect of teaching, specifically and intentionally teaching life skills and character education and leadership. In the 70s, before my time, from stories that I've heard, it was very physical, rough, tough. If you were tough, you lasted. If you weren't, you were out. In the 80s, the Karate Kid came out, so it was all about how to deal with bullies and the lessons that Mr. Miyagi taught, and that kind of became more. It was almost like, I remember it would be. Oh, we lost Brian, but he'll be back. So we were talking about the Karate Kid and how it somehow taught these lessons that weren't intentional, but they were just there. I think Mr. Miyagi made them intentional, but they were there. My instructor taught martial arts, and I can remember learning so many different lessons from him, and I always wondered, was it intentional? Was it not intentional? But so it's evolved, but now the business as well has
Yeah,
changed.
big time.
And like you said, social media, and I kind of laugh sometimes because social media is what it is, right? I love it for a lot of things, but I like it when I really meet people that are authentic and showing us, who they are, not who they want us to think they are.
Right.
And I think we can all tell the difference,
Yeah.
but things have changed quite a bit. I mean, and when you take 35 years, wow, right?
Yeah.
Let's go
It's
back.
almost actually 41. Yeah, because I started 84, June of 84. So this June is coming up in about 2 weeks is my 41st year starting
That's
martial
awesome.
arts. So
That's
I
very
mean, obviously
cool.
I've taken some breaks and had injuries and gotten married and had kids and stuff, but
Right.
I still go in there when I can, and luckily I have a key, so I go into the the dojang when I need to. I'll go in there on my lunch break. I'll go in there on the weekends, and even if I'm not going to class consistently as I'd like to, I'm still in there hitting the bag and practicing weapons and stuff. So yeah.
Well, talking about how martial arts has evolved, I want to show you a program. A great friend of mine, Kevin Kowalczyk. It's a
Mhm.
Raptor Extreme Karate. And just guys, take a look for a second. We'll talk about it when we come back. All right. That was 14-time world champion Kevin Kowalczyk. Again, great friend of mine and a great program. So if you guys want
Nice.
help connecting with Kevin or want to get involved adding something like this to your school, please let me know. But Brian, we've been talking about, getting started in radio, talking about the podcast, talked a little bit
Mhm.
about martial arts. Kind of want to get back to the radio show concept. What was the
Mhm.
biggest lesson you took away from the early rejections of your radio show comp? You're right, because you got turned down a bunch to do these different shows. I mean, what was the lesson behind it all?
Just perseverance. I mean, obviously, learn that from martial arts. Never give up. I'm one who I don't usually take no for an answer. So
Yeah.
yeah, especially my current instructor, like I said, that I've been with many years. He's taught me many. I mean, he's the reason I can get up in front and speak in front of people. I mean, I was a kid who was definitely stage fright when I was a kid and stuff. And he talked about baptism by fire, and he literally one night basically threw me in front of the class and said, "Mr. Bryan's in charge," and he left. And they were all higher ranks than me. So that's what my first time ever teaching a class was. Everyone outranked me and I was in charge. So it's like lessons like that, just keep moving, perseverance, and never give up. You can't take no for an answer.
Well, and I think that's a pretty valuable lesson. My coach in jujitsu, Sergio Machado, often says, when he will put someone up to teach a class, and it's not him, and they may not be the highest ranking class, but it's not about the students at that moment. It's about that instructor or that person growing and having that opportunity to
Exactly.
shine and to learn and to get uncomfortable. So, I think that may be that lesson that, hey, you're doing podcasting, you're doing radio. That takes some confidence being able to get out there, even though you're not always on screen.
Yeah, no, like I said, I'm a radio guy, so I prefer the audio stuff. Plus, the whole thing about my editing, if I were to add video to that, it would probably take even longer. Plus, there's less you can fix with video. Like you can't really take out ums with video, or you're going to have to chop up the video and stuff like that. Little things like that. There's little things that I can clean up and make it sound better, where you can't do that with video without really affecting what the video looks like.
Mm-hmm. So, what makes the producing a martial arts focused podcast different from your other projects?
Well,
Obviously, other than the
yeah.
theme and the topic, right?
Yeah, I mean, so like the first one I did that doesn't exist anymore, that was a theater podcast. All my kids have been involved in theater since a young age, and we were going to all these shows. And I actually, another thing I do kind of for fun, I used to really enjoy writing when I was younger, and I got asked to start reviewing local theater productions for this online BroadwayWorld.com. And so I was going to all these shows and reviewing them, and I'm like, might as well do it as a podcast. So I did that. So that was a lot of it was just me by myself talking about a show, which after a while it's like, that's not cool. It's just not, you can only do so much with just one person and nothing else on there. So I tried to find a co-host. That didn't work. That's kind of when I scratched that one. My other one is a music-based podcast. So that one's a lot easier. That one I can do, those average episodes of that one are anywhere from 9 to 18 minutes. I can record 10 of those in like 2 hours because I literally I know what songs, 3 songs on each one. I know what songs to do, and I record the intro, the outro. I'll have like 6 episodes ready where all the songs are, and I'll just record the voice for all 6 of them. And I'll just go through and edit, boom, put the songs in, and done. Suddenly I got 2 months of those episodes done in less than an hour. Whereas the martial arts one, it's just a lot more in depth with it. First of all, I want to find the guest. That's the biggest part, is finding the guest, getting them to say yes. I've only had 2 or 3 ever say no out of everyone I've asked. I mean, there's some that I've just never had a response from, but for people who have responded, I've only had like 3 no's ever. And out of those, 2 of them turned into yeses. So I've really only had 1 or 2 no's so far in almost 4.5 years. So, but it's doing that. And the other thing is too, trying to plan out the episodes. Like obviously I don't want 4 Taekwondo people in a row. So I try to, mix it up and get different styles and stuff, and people with different backgrounds. People, if there's a podcast, sometimes I've had like, 2 podcast hosts. Well, I don't want to do them back to back. I'll do one the one the next one. So it's planning that out to make it work. Another challenge too is, I've been lucky, but every now and then you get some guests that just don't like to talk. And that's really, really hard. And I try to coach them beforehand. It's like, the guests want to hear you, not me. Don't ever feel like you're talking too much. If you are, I'll tell you, trust me. But, people like I'll ask them a question and they'll give like a 10-second answer. Whereas another guest, that'll be a 12-minute answer. So
Right.
dealing with those differences and stuff like that. Luckily I've only had 1 of these so far, but basically I guess the only reason they came on was because they wanted to promote something. It literally sounded like an infomercial. I didn't even want to release it, but I had to because I needed an episode that week. But it was, I'm like, I told them beforehand, I'll give you a chance to promote this at a certain point. And every chance they got, my new book is my new book is here. My new book came out, and well, this is my book. And even when I ask you your favorite martial arts book, and like, other than your own, well, I haven't really read any other ones, so probably my own. I'm like, no, I just said not your own. So it's like, there's challenges with it, but 99% of my guests have been amazing and wonderful. And, that's it. And it's just, I love doing it. Like I said, I tell people, as long as they keep saying yes, I'm going to keep doing these episodes.
Right. Well, I've experienced a lot of what you just explained. In my first, so when I think we started around the same time, because I think it was during COVID for me as well. My reasoning was my martial arts school was basically shut down from physical teaching classes, and so I had to figure out. I had my instructors online teaching class. I'm like, well, I need something to do. And I always kind of thought it would be cool. Like, I know a lot of people that have great stories, and it'll just be a fun conversation. And that's evolved because I actually now really enjoy it because I learn so much from every guest,
Yes.
which is
Yep.
super cool. It's like my own private training session with someone. It started out for me all martial artists. I really
Hmm.
was just going to go after all the martial arts, and then I started meeting some speakers and authors and just different people, and it's just been fun. But you're right. There's the people that you try to contact, they don't respond.
Yeah.
And you reach out. I mean, I don't know what's worse, hearing someone say no or someone just not responding. I don't know. But I remember scheduling my first year. I did like 52 episodes I scheduled within the first like 2 weeks. I just had them locked out. And people are like, "You're scheduling for the end of the year?" I'm like, I just want to have it, set and good. And then I started getting crazy with roundtables and doing like multiple guests. So I'll have to have you back to do a podcast host roundtable. Those are actually kind of
Yep.
fun because it's a different dynamic. But yeah, the podcast is just it's pretty unique. So I love what you're doing. I've listened to a lot of them. You've had some great guests, like I said,
Yes.
and you said Mark Dacascos. I believe you had the late Richard Norton on
Yeah.
not too long ago.
That's one thing I've talked about with a lot of my guests is, 'cause so many guests have told me that they think my show is so important because these stories, like you have to tell these stories before these people pass away. And I've
Mm.
had now 3 of my guests pass away since they've done the show. And I had, one of my first 10 episodes, I think it was Mr. DeMille, who was one of Bruce Lee's original students in Seattle. I was his last interview before he passed away. I had
Wow.
Fumio Demura. I had Richard Norton, who's just amazing. That
Mhm.
was a shocker. I mean, first of all, he looked like he was just in amazing shape and amazing health, and did not look his age at all. And that
Right.
was just a shocker and such a loss to the martial arts world. And he passed away just like 2 months ago. About
Yeah.
so yeah. But he's been amazing. And he was such an and the cool thing too is with me is almost every one of my guests has referred another one. Some of them have referred dozens dozens
Yeah.
of guests. Most of my guests now come from referrals, and I still go out and look for some too, but
Hmm.
most of them come from referrals and stuff. Yeah, Richard Norton was amazing. Yeah, you mentioned Marta goes, but like, some of my favorite ones have been the ones who aren't known for martial arts, like NFL Hall of Famer Andre Tippett. I had 4 of the original American Gladiators in the early 90s. Talk about being an
Wow.
80s, 90s kid. I had
Cool.
Nitro, I had Malibu, I had Saber, I had Dallas. I just found I knew Nitro did martial arts, and I started digging into it. Like, oh, so does this person, so does Malibu, so does Saber. So I had them all on my show and stuff, and things like that. And one of my favorite episodes, probably because I got to meet him in person. Most of mine are virtual like this. My
Right.
first 20 some, I think half of them were in person. But my 100th episode was Ian Armitage from Young Sheldon. I was lucky enough to interview his instructor, and he's like, I can probably get you Ian. I'm like, really? So yeah, when I interviewed him, he was 14. He had just got his black belt in the Junery system. He had been studying since he was 4. And I'm telling you, I've met a lot of celebrities between radio and my show and everything else. Probably the nicest person I've ever met in my life, the most respectful person I've ever met in my life. And I got to meet him in person, a little over a year ago when I was out in DC. And he's just such a nice guy and great. And he had so much fun in the show. His mom told him that's the most fun he's ever had on an interview, I think. So, which made me feel good. But he was on there. Diana Lee Inosanto, Bruce Lee's goddaughter, things like that. Don the Dragon Wilson, Benny the Jet Urquidez. So yeah, I mean, I've been very, very lucky. Like I said, they keep saying yes, and they keep referring other ones, and I'm loving it. It's so much fun.
It's pretty crazy to think that there's so many martial arts, but it's such a small world. Like everybody is connected, like like they say with Kevin Bacon, right? The seven, is it 7 degrees, right?
7 degrees, Kevin Bacon. Yep.
I think in martial arts it's like 3. I think you're probably
Most
only
of them,
3
yeah.
degrees of separation. Yeah.
Yep.
So cool. Any guests coming up that you're really excited about?
Um, I've had a few come up that probably no one's ever heard of, but I got a few more that I'm going to be recording soon. On the deck, Higan Machado, he said yes. Carlos Machado said yes. I haven't scheduled either one of them yet. Cecil People said yes. That's one I'm really, really excited about. Greg Nelson from the Minnesota Martial Arts Academy. that's another one I've been hoping to get for a while. Trying to think of other ones I have coming up here. I'm kind of scanning through my list here.
Yeah, yeah. You'll have fun with Cecil Peoples. He lives in my area, so I actually see him
Oh,
quite often,
nice.
and he's such a cool guy. You'll have a lot of fun. He'll tell a lot of really good stories. You'll
Well,
love it.
another one I that said yes, and I haven't scheduled yet. I'm working my butt off to get him is Amin Santo. He was Mark Dacascos' capoeira instructor. He played his instructor in the movie also.
Oh, okay.
The guy that trained him in Brazil and stuff. So yeah, that's one I've been trying to get for a while, and Mark connected me with him. So I'm hoping that happens soon. And a few other big names I'm trying to get that haven't said yes yet, so I don't want to jinx it. But
Right.
yeah, it's just like I said, I put requests out there probably daily.
Yeah.
And I get referrals from other people probably daily too that I need to go through and be like, all right, yes, this person and this person, and
Well,
a few other ones I'm working on.
feel free to dig through the list of people that I've had on the show. I'll be happy to introduce them to you, and we can maybe do some swaps because I think there's
Nice.
a lot of great people that can go both ways.
Well, the one I'm
So,
trying to get, my
yeah.
one of my dream ones, Ralph Macchio. I'm,
I think Ralph Macchio and Billy Zabka is at
yep.
the top of the list, right?
I've
I've
had
got
I've had 5 or 6 from the Karate Kid universe, but I haven't
yeah.
had either one of them yet. So
All right.
hopefully I can get one of them or both of them.
Well, once again, anybody watching and you have connections, man, just let us know.
Definitely.
Wouldn't that be a cool show? That would be so
Oh,
cool.
it'd be so much fun.
Yeah. What's yeah, you've balanced both the martial arts training and a professional media career. How have these two worlds influenced each other for you? Obviously, you got some crossover, the people you know from martial arts to come on the show, but are there any other similarities?
Like I said, I talked a little bit about it already, but a lot of it is just the lessons from martial arts, the perseverance, the not giving up, and it's martial arts is just it's a good it's a good networking piece. Even if it's people I don't know. I mean, so I talk about my other podcast. My other podcast is an a cappella music podcast. That's another thing I've been passionate about for almost 30 years. I have over 4,000 acapella CDs, have an acapella podcast. And I've, just went into the acapella community. Hey, to any of my friends in the acapella community study martial arts, and actually
Hmm.
had a few guests that way. So you're a kid of the 80s, 90s, if you remember the show, Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego?
Yeah, yeah.
So the group that sang on there, Rockapella, their bass singer on that show, I found out I've known him for years and never knew he studied martial. He's like, yeah, I was studying martial arts for like 25 years. So he was one of my guests in like my first year and stuff. And so it's like the worlds, kind of collide every now and then and stuff. And lucky enough now with I started wearing I got kind of see the t-shirt in the background with my logo on, but I got a jacket printed up with the logo on just a couple months ago. And I've had random people come up and like, what's that about? What is everyday martial artist, and ask me about it and stuff. So I've gained some listeners. I've also had a few people, oh, you should talk to this person.
Hmm.
Reached out to people just because they saw my jacket. Like when I was visiting my son in Utah, I wore the jacket everywhere, even if it wasn't cold out. I'm wearing the jacket, jacket of the shirt to try to promote it and stuff like that. So try to
Yeah.
make those worlds combine and stuff. And it's just the big part I think is the perseverance. That's I keep going back to that, but it's a huge part of it, because so there's times, like I said, where I'm editing an episode at midnight, to try to get it, and usually I upload them at like 10:15, and I'm like still going 2-3 hours later. I'm like, do I really want to keep doing this? Because I do, though, because
Yeah.
then I'll get another guest lineup. Yes, I definitely want to do it, or I wouldn't have gotten this person. So
I know
it's
there's something about that excitement of getting that next guest, like
mhm.
you love what you're doing, you love the show you're on, and then as soon as you get done and you've done a bunch, you're like, that's a lot of work. But then it's like, oh, but I got this one lined up and I got that one lined up. And I mean, yeah, it's just really something for me. It's really fun to look forward to each week of who's going to come on the show. What are they going to talk about? How are they going to bring a different flavor to it? Yeah, I just want to give a shout out real quick. Michael Grant, thank you for watching. He was commenting back when we were talking
Nice.
about Johnny Lawrence, Billy Zabka, and Ralph Macchio. Michael, if you know them, just call them. Actually, I have a friend, I have a training partner who has a connection to Billy Zabka. I've
Nice.
actually asked him, "Hey, would you help connect me?" And he's like, I don't want to bug my buddy about it. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. I totally get it.
Well, and I have the, 3, 4, 5 other guests that have been in that Karate Kid universe, and I haven't. That's one thing I haven't done yet. I haven't, like, something I just don't. Sometimes I don't feel right doing that.
Right.
But at some point I'm going to be like, hey, any chance you can, like I interviewed someone who has a really good connection to Scott Adkins. He's another one I'd love to get on the show.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, I'm not saying give me his info, but if I write a letter, will you send it to him? And be like, hey, I'd love you to do this show. So he did that, which is good. I'm hoping maybe something will come of that, and I'll get Scott Adkins on the show. That'd be kind of cool. But it's like, but I like I said, I know at least 3 or 4 people who I think could get me in touch with Ralph Macchio and Billy Zabka. So fingers crossed.
All right, make it happen. Yeah, I was super excited. I had Mark Parra from the House of Champions here in Van Nuys, California, and he has a great connection with Peter Sugarfoot Cunningham. And back when I was a kid, Petey was like, everybody loved watching him fight. He was just so fast, so quick, so good, so smooth. And we were just talking, and he's like, well, do you want to interview him? I said, can you make it happen? And so like he texted me after the show, texted me his number, and I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. Now I'm going to get him on the show.
Richard Norton gave me his number. That's how I got. I haven't actually interviewed him yet, but he put me in touch with. He's like, you got to interview Sugarfoot. I'm like, I saw him fight in August '95. Before I moved to California, I drove out there to the Long Beach Internationals, and the night before they had kickboxing, and me and my buddy got to watch Pete Sugarfoot Cunningham fight. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome bouncing these names out there a little bit. And some of you that are watching, if you're not martial artists, you may not appreciate it as much, but it's always cool to have some of those childhood heroes or those people that you looked up to when you were a kid, and they were just super awesome. And that's kind of what helped keep me motivated in martial arts was those people that I looked up to. And now what's cool, being a martial artist for 40 years, I've got students who I hope that I inspire to love martial arts just as much, which is super cool. So tell me, what's a common myth that about martial arts that you love to just debunk on your podcast? Is there any myth about martial arts that you try to kind of blow that out?
Probably not on the podcast as much. It's maybe come up a couple times, but and I haven't heard it much recently, but I've had people bring it up, the old myth about when you're a black belt, you have to register your hands as deadly weapons. I used to, when I was younger, I actually got that question a lot. It's calmed down a bit, I think, because I'm guessing now people probably Google it and realize, that's complete BS. It's never been true in like any state. But that's probably one of the big ones. We jokingly talked about it on my show, I think 3 or 4 times. But that's one of the big ones. And I think the biggest myth, me personally, I don't know if it's really a myth, but it's just the belief that when you get to a certain age, you can't do it. It's like, I'm too old to start. I'm too old to start. And it's like, no. I mean, yes, maybe you're too old to get in the MMA cage, or maybe you're too old to do a specific style, but there's at least some martial art that anyone can do. Whether it's Tai Chi or Kung Fu, whether it's BJJ or Judo, Taekwondo, there's something for anyone that can do it. And
absolutely.
I think that, like I said, I don't know if I necessarily call it a myth, but I think a lot of people just seem, I'm too old to do it. I'm too old to do it.
Well, and there's some people that are genuinely interested, and they're just they're just either afraid or lack the confidence to take the step. And then there's just some people that's part of their excuse, right? Just like going to the gym or doing anything else. I mean, everybody's always got an excuse of why they can't do something. But I agree with you 100%. I think that I was talking to a grandpa at our karate school the other day. And I said, when are you going to jump out here? He's all, oh, I'm too old for that. I said, look, you could get out there and move. You can kick the bag. You can punch. I said, it'd feel pretty good to hit the bag a little bit, wouldn't it? He's all, oh, yeah, it would. So I was like, we can definitely work that out. So, yeah, it's never too late. One of the myths that kind of gets under my skin a little bit is the whole thing about junior black belts, or just that a black belt represents someone that is unstoppable and like they are the end all be all in martial arts. And I mean, yes, there is definitely a level of expectation of what a black belt could and should be, but like you're never going to have a 9-year-old black belt take out a 20-year-old male that's a big, strong football player just because he's a black belt. Now, the difference is that 9-year-old black belt would probably know the difference of when to walk away, when to run away, when to avoid that situation. So it always kind of kills me about, black belt. If you're going to be a black belt, you have to be able to beat up everybody. And I'm like, well, what happens when you do get a little bit older? What happens if you are a little bit smaller? Like, that's not
Yeah.
always the description of what a black belt is. I think you hit it with the perseverance. Go back to the tenets of Tong Soo Do: courtesy, integrity, perseverance, self-control, and Dharma spirit. Like
Yep.
a black belt demonstrates those things, right, to the fullest of their ability. Yes, they've learned some techniques, they've memorized some movements, they can spar, they can do this, they can do that. But listen, black belt is not the end all be all. As a matter of fact, you've been in martial arts a long time. We always say black belt is really
The
just
beginning.
just the
Yep.
beginning, right?
Yep.
So, I mean, let's not get hung up on that too much. Um, tell me, it's so funny. You started in Tong Soo Do. Where did you start in Tong Soo Do?
So I grew up
What's
in Little Falls, Minnesota. It's
okay?
right in the middle of the state, small town on the banks of the Mississippi River. And yeah, we literally went to the June 19th or June 20th, 1984. Went to the Karate Kid opening night, and as we're walking out of the theater, the instructor and his assistant are standing in the lobby in full uniform, handing out free passes. And went and started that Monday night. I was in a dance studio above the police station. And yeah, that was my first intro to martial arts was Tong Soo Do. So
Yeah, that's so cool. That's cool. I mean, I started in Tong Soo Do in '85, so a year later than you. Karate Kid had a lot to do with it. It's so funny because the Karate Kid Legends just came out, 2
yep,
weeks
I
ago,
saw it.
and
Yep,
and you got a free pass back in 1984 to go take karate. Well, guess what we were doing? Handing out passes for martial arts. It still works. It's always going
yep,
to work, right?
yep.
But my lineage traces back. My instructor is Dennis Ichikawa. He was taught
Okay.
by Pat Johnson and Chuck
Oh,
Norris. He ran
wow.
the Sherman Oaks Karate School in California, Southern California,
Hmm.
and so talk about 3 degrees of separation, right? Ichikawa, Pat Johnson, Chuck Norris, like
Wow.
super
Yeah.
cool. Were you more on the Korean side?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
If I remember, I mean, I did it for less than a year.
Okay.
Unfortunately, parents couldn't afford to keep paying for it. But and what's interesting is, and maybe you know more about it because of the background, but my instructor, Master Bill Nelson, who I'm still friends with. He was one of my first guests on the show. I don't know when it happened, but at some point they switched from Tong Soo Do to Subak Do.
Right.
So he's now on the Subak Do side. So
Right.
yeah, I know we
Well,
talked about. I mean, that was 4 years ago. We talked about like what that difference was, and I don't remember a lot of that, but.
Subakdo is really kind of the original Tong Soo Do,
Okay.
so that just kind of traces back. My instructor would tell me stories of when he was with Chuck Norris. He tested for black belt in 1973, the year before I was born. And on the day of his black belt test, literally, it was, okay, we are splitting from Korea. So you can do this or you can do that, and you need to choose now. And I was like, wow.
Wow.
Wow. Right. So
Wow.
yeah, there's a lot that you can get into the history and the division of all the systems and styles, but I just thought it was pretty unique that we both started in Tong Soo Do. Tell me more about your training and just tell me a little bit more about what you've gained from martial arts, just personally.
Oh, personally, it's just reinforcing that same thing, especially the perseverance. I don't know how much you know about my full background, but I started with my current instructor. I started Taekwondo in September 92 when I started college, and then switched to my current instructor in March of 94. I actually tested for my black belt in November 96, the night before Thanksgiving. Drove home from California to test because I'd already moved to California to
Mhm.
start training in American Kempo. And I didn't pass. And of course, we went back to California. And then when I moved back, like a year later and got married and started having kids, I kept putting it off because I was working. I was busy raising kids. I was doing this. I was doing that. Fast forward 10 years. I finally, it was 2006. And I went to my instructor in like April of that year. I said, sir, this is the year I have to do this, or I'm not going to do it. I said, I have to come back and retest. Not
Mhm.
retest, because by then he's like, you're doing the whole thing over because it's like,
Right.
it's been 10 years. And I think he actually gave me more. So yeah, but I trained for 6 months, literally 7 days a week for 6 months. Lost like 60 pounds, getting in shape. I was working out every morning at 4 a.m. at Anytime Fitness. Then I'd go over the lunch break to the martial arts school and train on my own. Then I'd go to class that night. Plus on the weekends, I was training like 4 or 5 hours a day. Never took a break for like 6 months. And finally got my black belt that year and stuff. And of course was training, getting ready for my second degree like a year and a half later, and re-injured my knee again. I blew out my knee when I was literally the day before my 16th birthday. I blew out my knee in high school gym class, completely shattered my ACL and my lateral meniscus, and re-injured the knee. So put that off, and I went back multiple times and kept re-injuring the knee. Either that or a job would stop me from training. So it's been off and on. I haven't gone back consistently enough to go for my second degree. But I've also been one who I've never been hung up on the rank. I got that black belt. That was the important thing, and I just wanted to make sure I kept going back. But I pretty much same thing as like 2006. I finally decided I'm going for it this year. I've been waiting way too long. I've been putting off my second degree test for like 15 years. So I'm gonna kick my training hopefully into high gear, and hopefully my knee will hold up again, because I never had the knee rebuilt. I was supposed to have it rebuilt when I was 20, and I don't listen to doctors that well. So that's
common theme with martial artists.
That is true. Luckily, I have high tolerance for pain. So yeah, the plan is to start hopefully over the summer, start going to class again 3 times a week if I can. And then, like I said, I still have the key, so I go in on weekends on my own. What I'll do is something I've always done, even before I was a black belt. I think I've had a key since I was a brown or red belt. But I've always, like new students who are getting ready to test, I've always gone up to them and like, hey, if you need help, here's my card. If you want to come in on a Saturday, no charge, I'll come in and I'll train with you, because it, as most instructors know, it helps you as much as it helps them.
Absolutely.
And I've always had people like, and I've had so many that won't take me up on because they don't think I'm serious, and then they'll come in like class that night and we'll be talking with another student. Oh, you guys really came in? Oh, I'll do it next week. So yeah, we'll do that and stuff, and so hopefully get a lot more extra training in on Saturdays and Sundays and stuff. And my goal is maybe by fall, sometime in the fall or maybe early winter, if I think I can be ready by then, and the knee stays healthy, I can go back and just do it again. That's kind of what I want to do. And another thing I've also been talking about since I interviewed him, Bill Superfoot Wallace, I've been talking about doing his Superfoot system. So because that's mostly virtual. You do have to go there and like do the test and stuff in person. I think you have to go to like 2 in-person ones, and the test is in person. The way his system works and stuff. And that's one thing I want to do. I got a few friends who have gone through it and got their black belt through him, because you have to be a black belt in another system, another stand-up system. And you have to like do the virtual thing. I think it's for like a year or something like that. But I definitely want to do that. And at some point in my life, now that all the kids, our youngest daughter just graduated a few weeks ago, so all the kids are now going to be hopefully out of the house soon. Yeah, thank you. So hopefully I can focus more on that. And I'd love to get back into the Kempo side of things. I miss that, because that was my dream style, was ever since seeing The Perfect Weapon. I wanted to do American
Jeff
Kempo.
Speakman.
Exactly. I moved to California to train with Jeff Speakman. I got to train with Jeff Speakman, Larry Tatum, interviewed them both in my podcast. But I'd love to get back into the Kempo side. There's unfortunately no local instructors that do American Kempo, so I'd have to either do it virtually or travel. But it's another, like I said, another thing I'd like to do at some point. But right now the focus is trying to finally go for that second degree black belt that I've been putting off way too long. So we'll see.
Good for you. Well, you said it here live on all social media channels. So anybody watching, if you're a good friend of Brian's, you're going to hold him accountable to this. You're going to remind him that he said he's going to test for second degree. Because I tell my kids, I tell my students, if you say you're going to do something, you got to follow through. No matter how long it takes, got to follow through. And you proved that with your first degree black belt, and I'm sure that you'll do the same here. Brian, it's been amazing having you on the show, and just talking about your background, talking about the podcast, talking about all your experience on the radio, voiceovers. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that maybe you want to let the audience know about?
If there are any fans out there who maybe do like a cappella music, feel free to look up my other podcast called Uncovered Acapella. It's under the name Brian Michaels. That was my radio name that when I was on the air, was Brian Michaels. It's every week. It's 3 original acapella songs from 3 different artists, no cover tunes whatsoever. Because originally I wanted to, my old radio show was all kind of cover songs and everything, but I found out to stream that I'd have to pay all the rights for those songs. Right. So I talked to an entertainment lawyer. I'm like, well, what if I get rights from all these groups that have original songs? He's like, yeah, if you get permission from them, and they don't want to charge you, go ahead. So I went and contacted all these groups I'd known over 25 years of doing this radio show, and got permission from over 150 groups, and just started playing their music. So yeah, 3 songs every week. And there was a short break because we had some technical stuff where I think it was Spotify that shut it down because there's music on it, and they're like, you don't have the rights. I'm like, yes, I do. But they, so now you can't hear it on Spotify. You can hear it pretty much any other podcast app except Spotify. But everyone else is cool because I got permission from the group. So that's kind of a fun one. The other thing is just I encourage people to go back if they want to check out the show, everydaymartialartist.com. Otherwise, you can listen to any podcast app. But go back and listen to old episodes. They all, that's one reason I wanted to do that type of show, so it wasn't like current event stuff where it's like 3 weeks later, there's no point in listening to it. I want people, and I've had a lot of listeners that'll find the show. Be like, yeah, I just found your show 2 months ago and I've listened to all 200 episodes. I'm like, right. Wow, thank you. That's really, really cool. Yeah. I've had a lot of listeners that do that because I'll look when I get a spike, and I'll go back, and all the old ones are getting spikes too. So it's cool that they go back. And if people want to hear a little more of my story, my very, very first episode, because as you probably know with like podcasts, usually before you release a podcast or when you release your first episode, it takes anywhere from 2 to sometimes 5 weeks for them to hit all the apps. So people either release a trailer or a preview episode. So what I did was I actually had a good friend of mine who's a martial artist and also a radio guy. He interviewed me on the first episode.
Oh, cool.
It was, I didn't really expect people to listen to it. It was just to get it out there, and if people wanted to, they could, but most people go back and listen to that one too. So that's, kind of tells a little more in depth of my story and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, there's even people who aren't diehard martial artists. I have guests they're going to like I said, the kid from Young Sheldon, NFL. I have comedians, motivational speakers, business owners and stuff like that. People who have been on American Ninja Warrior and things. So it's just scroll through and type in some keywords and search. But yeah, 223 episodes and still going. And I just encourage people to listen and also check out other martial arts podcasts. There's a lot of good ones out there. And I'm trying, a goal I set when I started this, I want to have every other martial arts podcast host on my show. Of course, more and more keep popping up. So that's really hard to do. But yeah, I've had a lot of them on there, and I'm still working on getting more. So it's kind of, it's not like in radio. Like if you had a show that was on at the same time as another one, you don't want to help each other because you're competing. Whereas a podcast, people can listen anytime. That's right. That's right. You help each other and support each, which is martial arts. You're helping each other and lifting each other up and supporting them. So,
yeah. Well, I definitely know of a couple of really great martial arts podcasts out there, but hope that everybody goes out and checks out Everyday Martial Artist podcast. Beyond the Mat is another podcast out there by Mark Cox. You got Rich Grogan that's got his program out there. Really, really good ones. Sifu Raphael. So we'll have to talk, and we'll have to help get some more of those guys on your show as well. Yeah. And while we're still on, I just want to give a quick shout out to Emilio Roman and thank him because we have a book coming out, Born to Risk, the 2nd edition. I will be a co-author of this book, so I'm super excited about that. So thank you, Emilio, for watching, and I'll have more information about that a little bit later. But anything else, Brian, you want to add to the show before we sign off?
Yeah, since you just mentioned that, I didn't actually, I've talked about it on a few of my shows, but last October I actually started writing my first book. So good for you. Kind of throw it out there so people, I probably haven't touched it in like 5 months, but another one, people who know me, ask me how the book's going. Maybe it'll motivate me to sit down and write a chapter here and there. So it'll be fun. I think it's going to be a good one. And I've maybe 20, 30 pages in or something. I think about 22 pages in right now. But it's a long, like I said, I love writing. I just haven't really done it much. I creative writing class in high school. I had to write a 10-page story and it ended up being a 110-page story. Wow. So I kind of went, overachiever a little bit there, but had a cool teacher. So I really enjoyed it. But yeah. So yeah, that's something I'm hopefully in the next couple years. I'm not going to put an actual target.
I know, because if you do, I'm going to hold you to it. I'm going to call you and be like, hey, Brian, where's the book? Well, hey,
I'd love to get a first draft done in the next year and a half. We'll see.
All right. Well, hey, keep at it. Keep going with the podcast. Want to let everybody know I got a couple of really good guests coming up in the future here. We have Joe Corley next week. Nice. And then, believe it or not, for all my friends and family that are watching this, on June 26th, I have the one, the only, my wife, Jackie Flame. She'll be on June 26th. And then I got, man, I got so many. I'll save it. I'll post links later because I'll make you watch. All right. But thank you, Brian, for being on the show today. Thank you for all that you do. Keep spreading the love of the martial artist with your podcast, because I know we want to continue the legacy of martial arts and preserve the history of martial arts. It's one of the things that I love most about it. And I think our podcast really does kind of do that for the next generation. So keep doing what you're doing.
Hey, thank you, sir. I appreciate the opportunity to come on, and sorry it took so long.
It's all good. I think it was on both our parts, but I had a great time today. Wishing you all the best. Go get that 2nd degree black belt, work on that book, and guys, go out and make your dreams happen. Have a great rest of the week and a good weekend. Take care.
Have a good night.